you can start.
Okay. Today is day 94 on 100 days books, places and readers in Richmond, Virginia. And here we are at the main branch library park, and today I'm going to talk about a little bit about the brief and wondrous life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. And I like this book in a way that it merges Spanish and English in a way that, at least for me as a native Spanish speaker, doesn't interrupt the flow, which would make sense that you would expect from a Spanish speaker. But what I appreciate about this book is that most of the times the Spanish insertions are not idolized or idolized. When they are inclined to one area. Well, I guess for the camera to this area, and the Spanish mixes with the English in a very cohesive way. And I haven't seen that. There is a plane going. I haven't seen that since Cormac McCarthy's All the Pretty Horses, and since the story there happens in Texas and Mexico, it makes sense that there is a flow of Spanish and English from all the characters, from Spanish-speaking characters and the English-speaking characters. The main character speaks English and Spanish very well. Here, the main character is a English native speaker from Dominican heritage, so he speaks Spanish at home very well, and which it wasn't my case. I started speaking English coherently, or almost coherently, when I moved to the US. So it wasn't my case. So it was great to see that representation here in the book, in the main character of Oscar, and also to you will be able to see, when you read this book, you will be able to see that Latin America sort of flows through this character in a great way. It's a little kid. We'll see him growing and jumping back and forth in flash forwards and flashbacks, but and from different perspective, from his sister and from his mom perspective too. So that's great about this book. It's very Faulkner, and in the way that mixes the realities and perspective from different characters. But we'll see him making sense of his Latin American inheritance or heritage. Her mom's generations in Latin America, which I wasn't aware of, much of the Dominican Republic, besides the awful genocidal history from Trujillo, that you will also be able to see in this book. One of the most interesting things is that I wasn't aware of. For me, is that since I wasn't aware of that sort of extended history of the Dominican Republic, through these characters I was able to know more. And when I moved to Richmond, I was fortunate to meet people from different places around the world, and especially this Dominican family that I was able to associate. When I was reading the book, when I was at their house, I was able to sort of soak all the traditions and the ways and the modisms of speaking and the phrases. So when I was reading the book, I can tell that the characters here said the same phrases that are in the book, spelled in Spanish and without explanation, which I'm sure will prompt the reader to look up what it means, and they will stumble across the history of the phrase, for example, or what does it mean in a non-literal way. And also here you will be able to see many unfortunate behaviors that you find in any human being, like abuse, for example, which is a subject that thankfully is being talked a lot lately, that it might bring a lot of awareness to people and will help a lot of people too to advance. and the society too as well. So here you will find that although this is a book written by a male author, which is very prevalent in Latin America, as in the world, male authors sort of are the ones with the spotlight, as with physics, chemistry, biology, male gets the credit, has been getting the credit for a long time. Happens in one of the things that I'm interested in doing as a researcher in genetics and statistics. One of the most famous cases is that the three people that sort of worked to discover the double helix structure of the DNA was one of them was female, and she was the one who actually took the radiograph and took and discovered, but the male authors got the credit and the recognition. But now, in the history of genetics, people focus on her contribution as the main contribution, and to see that yes, more than 100 years ago, we didn't pay much attention to most of females' accomplishments and discoveries or contributions to science. And the same trend happens in literature and authors, where in Peru, where I'm from, originally most of the authors recognized authors are white dudes. Well, now they're old, but I mean they have higher higher age. But in Latin America, it's very difficult to ask somebody. It's very difficult at all to ask somebody for a name of an author, as in the U.S. and in the world. But it's very difficult to that somebody can name a female author besides the Chilean author Gabriela Mistral, which is one of the most famous Latin American and one of the most accomplished female authors in Latin America. It's very difficult to name that the average people in the street will name a female contemporary author, as Junot Diaz is. So this book also represents that in the way that you see the characters abusing each other. You see verbal abuse, suppression of speech. You see how kids are mistreated by their parents and their uncles. You see from a male perspective, but you also see slightly from a female perspective written by a man. But still, there is some. The multiple perspective gives you how a kid might respond to mistreatment and to abuse. And so that's one of the good things, that besides the controversies surrounding authors, it's great to see how the book itself detaches from the author and can give you a lot of insights from the characters' perspectives. It will be great if female authors have more of a podium to have more perspective. When you increase this perspective, it's like increasing your sample size. When you increase your sample size, a better representation of the population is shown. So if you have more female authors being recognized by readers, which is the readers' duty is to read more in general, but also to read more female authors, you will get a grasp of more diversity in perspective. So in this book you will see diversity of perspective from female and male characters, but still it will be great to increase the readership, I don't know if that's a word, of female of female authors too, contemporary especially, because our current social changes are speeding up, so we as readers should get on track of reading also contemporary authors, also the classics, but also contemporary authors. And one of the great things about this book is that at the beginning it gives you a context. The first part, the introduction part, gives you a context of the Dominican Republic and a lot of things that come from Latin America, that's like superstition and curses and belief in curses. So it gives you a great perspective. And the main character, Oscar, he wants to be a sci-fi writer. So in a way, one of the great things about him is that He comes from a highly about the story sets it up this way, but he comes from a highly superstitious tradition in the Dominican Republic, but he also is bringing some sci-fi, science fiction goals in his life as a writer. So in a way, he's merging that tradition of superstition and things that are not real, well, things that tend to be not real, with the sci-fi, and his way of getting out of being abused by his peers and his family in an imaginary world it's something very prevalent in the book that happens to his older sister, that she also runs away from his family because of the abuse, just to encounter more abuse with the outside world. So it's abuse is very prevalent in this book, and it gives you a perspective of what consequences might bring to especially kids that are not treated as little human beings that they are. I mean, any human being constantly so freaking abused, it's going to bring not so many good outcomes later in their lives, and that cycle just potentially will likely to be repeating. Abuse people might in the book will repeat that. His mom abused him and asked him to, in a jokingly way, to say, why don't you just hit her, to his little kid. And that's something that we might not see in the real world, but the fictional world has that capacity that will bring us and expose us to very crude and raw stuff that under the umbrella of fiction can let us have a lesson, that this happens or might happen, so maybe I should not do this. There is a great quote that you can find earlier in the book, that is Oscar is talking about that he likes a girl in his neighborhood in New Jersey. He describes himself as a chubby 8-year-old Dominican boy from New Jersey. I don't know where in New Jersey, but so he sees this girl. He loses his speech when seeing this girl. He cannot talk to her, so he's kind of talking aloud at his house, and his mom, which is a hard-working woman with 3 jobs, 2 single mom, 2 boys in New Jersey, saying to Oscar, when Oscar whimpered, she said to his son Oscar, "Tú estás llorando por una muchacha," which is, "Are you crying for a girl?" And so she, violently, she said that to Oscar, and her sister sort of intervenes and said, "Mommy, stop it," to not to be so aggressive to Oscar. And she said she grabbed him and threw him to the floor, his little son, and said, "Dale un galletazo," which is give him slap in the face to the little girl if she doesn't like you. You might. So their mom is saying, slap her in the face if she doesn't like you, to the little son. And I believe I cannot curse here on the video. I can, great. So then she said, then see if the little puta respects you, which means is, I'm quoting, by the way. It says, see if the little whore respects you after you give her the slap in the face. So the mom is, sort of training the little Oscar to be violently, physically aggressive to somebody, to a girl that doesn't engage in consensual, reciprocal correspondence, flirting, or little kids. So the mom, in a way, encourages to see this, and it's. I'm not going to say that it's common, but you can see that in human behavior, not only in Latin America but across the world. So, in a way, being exposed to fictional situations like this one might help the reader to see, yeah, this exists, it faces you with this kind of training little people to that abuse might serve their outcomes, which is so wrong. And sadly, in our current times, that's sadly it is prevalent, but thankfully it's being talked about. It's being talked about in our current times, and hopefully we will make good decisions as a country to move on from that. Thank you for listening to my rambling and to my free association thoughts about this book, and how important it is to not only read, but read different authors from different countries, from different genders, and from different times in the history of literature. Thank you. Party Parks.
Thank you.